Welcome to the only daily podcast focusing on compliance news of the day. Each morning, start your day with a cup of coffee and Tom Fox, the voice of compliance, to hear about 4 of the top compliance, corruption, or leadership stories you will need to start your day. The Daily Compliance News is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network.
First, a word from our sponsor. The Daily Compliance News for July 16, 2022, the How Do You Stop Cheating edition. And we begin with that story from the Financial Times. The UK accounting regulator, the Financial Reporting Council, wrote last week to the chief executives of the 7 largest auditing firms in the United Kingdom, asking them to explain how they prevent or will stop staff cheating on professional exams. This is based upon the recent enforcement action in the United States by the Securities and Exchange Commission around EY, but it is also other accounting firms have been fined as well, given the, quote, severity and repeating nature of exam cheating claims. So it's going to be interesting to see how these firms respond, if it will be the normal platitudes that we only hire ethical people. Next up, in a very interesting case out of South Africa, 2 former employees of ABB, the Swiss industrial firm, were indicted for corruption in South Africa around the former corrupt regime of President Zuma. The thing that makes it most interesting is their wives were also indicted, apprehended, and charged. So this is the first time I recall seeing a wife who was married to someone alleged to have engaged in bribery and corruption be arrested. The ABB employees were alleged to have received kickbacks based upon their corruption. So really interesting development. Next up, from the Wall Street Journal, Risk and Compliance Journal, David Smagmala reporting that the Department of Treasury has published a fact sheet that seeks to clarify its sanctions on Russia's policy. Interestingly, it says that agricultural products and medical products are not targets of U.S. sanctions. So if you have a question about what is currently covered under the Office of Financial Assets Controls, this fact sheet would be a good reference point for you. The final story comes to us from the BBC, interestingly, and it reports on a series of lawsuits for sexual attacks by Uber drivers. The lawsuit filed in San Francisco, and why the BBC is reporting on that and not U.S. press, I'll leave that one to your imagination. Nevertheless, it details multiple instances where Uber drivers attacked, or allegations where Uber drivers attacked women, and other allegations which came from the release of the Uber papers. The papers, Uber documents, leaked recently from an internal senior executive who became a whistleblower for allegations against Uber. Very damaging stuff. The Daily Compliance News is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network and a proud member of C-Suite Radio. Thanks so much for listening. I hope you'll join me again tomorrow.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.